Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna. And with me this episode, our executive art director, Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Special projects editor, Matt Kinney.
Howdy.
And our web producer, Ben Strano.
Yo.
Jeff has decided to abandon us today.
And that's the podcast.
And we're done. We're out.
We're so upset about Jeff that we're not going to do a podcast.
It's a short version. Hey, before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that registration for Fine Woodworking Live 2017 is open. The show is happening April 21st through the 23rd at the Southbridge Hotel and Conference Center in Southbridge, Mass. We'll have probably close to 20 presenters or more. There'll be some tool demos. Mike and Matt will be demonstrating. But yeah, you can come down and hang out with us for like 2.5 days, 3 days. It's kind of fun. But yeah, go to finewoodworkinglive.com to check out the class schedule, the program, and to register. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, it looks
Definitely.
great. Yeah. Some really good presenters and a great, beautiful place to have it, right?
Yeah, and Hank Gilpin will be the keynote speaker at the banquet.
Be entertaining for sure.
That will be, yes.
Interesting.
It'll be very entertaining, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, come on down. Help us out. Have some fun.
Help us out. We're putting up a barn.
Help us out.
Yeah.
Help us sweep up after.
Yeah. All right.
That's not funny because actually people did help us sweep up at the build-off the last time we did live.
Yeah, that's right.
Poor attendees for manning brooms.
You won the build-off. Your prize is you get to clean up.
You get to vacuum. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that we partner with the Highland Woodworker web TV show to help the host Chuck Brock and his team put together the show. The latest episode, number 27, is live now, and Mike was the moment with the master feature.
Yeah, I was the master for a moment, and now I'm back. So it was short-lived, but wonderful.
No, that was actually, I thought that was a great interview. I loved the photographs, the family photographs that Mike had put up of was your great-grandfather or grandfather?
Grandfather.
And the car that you built, cool stuff.
My soapbox derby car. Yeah.
I liked, there's one scene, I've never seen the upstairs of your house, Mike. I've known you for 8.5 years. But you go they're upstairs and over your shoulder, you can see into your bathroom.
Yeah, I know. That's funny. The only people who mention that are you and my wife. I said, oh my God, they can see into the bathroom. So, yeah, thanks for that. Take a look.
Yeah.
And now you know.
Pause and see what's in there.
But that was a good episode because you know who else is on that episode? Our own John Tatro.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miter Dovetails.
Miter Dovetails, yeah. So I watched that episode.
Good episode. And there's even the tool collector, James Curry, down in Tennessee somewhere. I was having a hard time understanding some of what
Columbia,
he was saying,
Tennessee?
but he has got quite a wrench collection, as Ben pointed out.
Yeah.
So
Never at a loss for a wrench.
No, it's funny. You know, when I watched something like that,
wouldn't that be great though? He's like, he's like working around the house, and he's like, God damn it, I need a wrench. And he's like, oh, I don't have that size. And he's like, oh, I can't use one of my nice one from the collection. But can't use that one.
It's funny what people collect. You know, he collected beer cans and bottles too, and as I was looking at the collection, he had like modern day Budweiser cans and things like that. And man, it's funny. I watch American Pickers once in a while, and I'm always amazed at how people start piling up stuff. But his collection was quite neat and organized. I have to say that, and he had some cool hand planes.
It is interesting. It's because there are a lot of woodworkers are sort of tool geeks, and they like to, like some people I know have lots of hand planes, more than they really need.
Yes.
And it's something. It's something that I completely do not understand. I mean, I get like maybe I'll have a couple of. I don't know. I don't get how many having more than one number 4, for example. Then collecting tools, I just don't. I'm like the complete opposite. It's like I want to throw that stuff out.
Me too.
just like get it out of here. But that's definitely a whole mindset I don't get. Oh, well, it's people, right?
Yeah. People are people. People.
People loving
Anyway,
people.
if you want, you can check out all of the episodes at thehighlandwoodworker.com. So let's move on to question number 1. This one is from Max. And Max says, I've been working with milk paint lately, and I love it. Not only is the appearance great, but it's just so awesome to be able to work with something that's non-toxic. Could you guys make some suggestions on any other non-toxic products that are similarly great to work with? I've heard that shellac is actually edible, and I'm not going to try it, and I wouldn't recommend that he try to chew on
I
that.
wouldn't.
Yeah,
It's
probably.
not a good idea.
Well, yeah, go for it. It's no big deal. It's like in terms of toxic, there are really sort of 2 different considerations. One is, the final finish when it's dry. And as is often noted, any finish that's fully cured is in essence non-toxic.
Yeah.
Except for lead paint. So so there you go.
Don't chew the lead paint.
They're lead paint.
But the other consideration is what are the hazards like before it's dry in terms of applying it? Like milk paint, when you're stirring it up and stuff, that powder is so fine, you probably shouldn't be breathing that. So a lot of the really fine silicates I know are really bad for your lungs. So I would imagine and isn't there lye in milk paint? Something caustic?
There's only lying in politics.
I don't know. Okay. Well, then the same thing with shellac. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's lye in. I would not eat milk paint though.
Okay.
Did you
that's
just? I wasn't listening. Did you suggest someone should eat milk paint?
I'm
he's
talking about the hazards
powders. Inhaling
in
it.
either using or mixing a finish before it's cured, which even if it's non-toxic when it's dry, it still might present some problems. For instance, shellac. Shellac, the product in and of itself is edible. It's inert. But the alcohol, the denatured alcohol that you're...
is deadly poisonous.
Yes, and there are even different levels of toxicity in the type of denatured alcohol that you want to use. One, you can use Everclear, which theoretically is consumable, but will pose its own problems.
Right. It'll obscure your judgment.
But the denatured alcohol in the hardware store is usually a mix between methanol and ethanol. One of those is bad, and I always forget which one is bad. But they say that the Clean Strip brand denatured alcohol with the green label, like the environmentally friendly label, has a much, much lower concentration of the nasty stuff and is actually less harmful for you to use. So we think of shellac being non-toxic, but it can still pose hazards while you're putting it on.
But also, isn't it the case that any finish, once it's fully cured,
Yes, except lead paint, as we just
Except lead
discussed.
paint.
they don't sell lead paint anymore. So
I can get it. I know a guy.
yeah, it all comes in flake form. But any finish once it's fully cured is non-toxic. But I don't. I get the. I guess if you're making a kid's crib, right, you would want a non-toxic finish, but you can also buy teething guards to go over rails and stuff so that they chew on that rather than the wood. But otherwise, I don't. What are you worried about? I guess if you're making a salad bowl or something, you're not chewing on your furniture.
Yeah, for cutting boards, I've used like a mix of beeswax and mineral oil.
I've used mineral oil myself, but I think he's more concerned about working with it. It sounds like. I'm not sure if...
Well, there is a new non-toxic finish called polyurethane, and I heard it's really good. It lasts a long time. It's got a really nice half-life.
you buy it at Trader Joe's.
Oh, well, I was going to say soap. There's that soap finish.
Soap finish, yeah. Actually, that came out pretty nice. That was Hans... what was it? Reed Hansold?
Yeah.
Who did that soap finish?
Yep.
So...
And you can get a true boiled linseed oil from Tried and True, which is non-toxic, whereas the boiled linseed oil that you get in hardware store
Has
shelves
metallic dryers in it.
is nasty and quite
Yeah.
toxic. Don't put that on food items because it's going to take forever to cure, meaning it's nasty until it does cure. What else?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Non-toxic.
Non-toxic.
Latex paint.
Mineral oil,
Mineral oil.
on a cell.
But mineral oil doesn't really dry hard ever.
It doesn't. That's what I mentioned.
Neither
I've used it
does
for cutting
genuine
boards.
boiled linseed oil, right? It doesn't really ever harden.
You could just burnish the surface of a hardwood. Either I use like a wire brush to burnish oak to open the grain, but it also gives it a really hard polish to it.
Yeah.
And then I just finish that up with just regular paste wax on top of that. What's the little bristle thing, polisseur or something? Don't people like burnish wood with that thing? Ben?
Yeah,
Ben's seen
it's called
Google
a
it.
donkey brush.
you. Donkey brush.
Don't be an ass.
You could also just melt chocolate and then cover it in chocolate, and that would be non-toxic and delicious.
All right. Okay.
All right. Let's move on to...
You know those letters that say your humor is not humorous and it's a waste of my time?
We just lost 15, 20 seconds. Right?
You know, no argument there.
All right. This next question, it's not really a question. It comes from Joe. And Joe says, first, I want to thank Tom, Mike, Matt, and Ben for the awesome podcast every 2 weeks. I've been listening since the beginning and haven't missed an episode. I think the mix of solid woodworking info with some slapstick comedy keeps the show fun and informative. I do have a negative comment for the magazine, though. I just got my Tools and Shops issue, and I was bummed that it didn't have the cool retro cover style. I hope it can be used on next year's cover.
Well, you're in luck and you don't even know it because that cover has never actually changed all that much in the lifespan of that issue. So that is the retro cover.
That is the retro cover. Yeah. I mean, the Tools and Shops issue is actually an extra issue for the magazine.
Yeah.
So we've always treated it differently. And because of its separate title, it's got its own title, Tools and Shops.
Yeah, it's not a fine. It doesn't say Fine Woodworking.
Right.
It says Fine Woodworking's Tools and Shops.
Right. Yeah. So just we treat it as a different product. And so that's why it didn't get the cool retro treatment.
Yeah, much like the NHL, Fine Woodworking had an original 6. And now there's a 7th, which is still the Tools and Shops issue.
Huh.
I don't know what that means.
The NHL had 6 teams originally.
Oh.
I think.
And they all made the playoffs.
And it still took 8 months for the playoffs.
I love hockey.
Yeah,
Playoff
it was
hockey.
the Blackhawks, some Canadian teams, which I'm going to get more familiar with here shortly. But anyways, let's move on. I really like the cover of this year's Tools and Shops. I'm glad it had a nice big picture on it.
Of course,
because I took that picture.
Yeah.
It's another one that hangs in my bathroom now. Got all the covers that I've ever shot
We'll send Charles
framed and put in my bathroom.
Next year, Charles is going to come to your house.
That's right.
We're going to go inside the medicine cabinet. All right, let's move on to our first segment. It's time for our all-time favorite article of all time for this week. And I'll throw it to Matt first.
Oh, okay.
Come on, man.
So my favorite all-time article of this week is an article by Chris Bexford, and it is about the different types. Well, so it's an article called "Classic Shaker." Discover the difference between the masterful and the near miss. So what this article is about is that a lot of times when you think of shaker furniture, what people think of is like the classic shaker design.
Or like the Shaker Workshop's catalog.
Yeah, the Shaker Workshop's catalog. And what is perhaps less known about the Shakers is that prior to that sort of high style that they developed, which is uniquely Shaker, they had an earlier period where the work was heavily influenced by local design, very not rudimentary, but very, in the vernacular of the local area. And then after that high period, a lot of their furniture was heavily influenced by Victorian style.
Yes.
So there's just this middle period, and that's where all the really fantastic shaker furniture comes from. And what I like about this article, well, a couple of different things. One, I'm not saying I like it because I edited it, but I did edit it. And one of the things I like about it was that Chris Bexford and I met at Hancock Shaker Village, and I spent the day going through all of the furniture at Hancock Shaker Village with Chris and also the curator there, and we got to see not only the stuff that's normally on display, but everything else that they had in the attics and all that kind of stuff. And it was great to go through that with two experts in shaker furniture and to see that. But what I more like about it, so on a personal level, I really appreciate that article because I learned a lot. But what I like more about it is that it points out something I think that gets, as woodworkers, or furniture makers, we miss a lot, especially when it comes to older stuff, that there's just this reverence for anything old, right? So, it's a period piece. It's really nice. Or, that's a arts and crafts piece. Or, that's how they made it back in the olden days. There's like this unending reverence for old stuff. And the fact is, there's a lot of crap made in the past. There's ugly shaker furniture. There's ugly period furniture. There's a whole lot of ugly arts and crafts furniture.
Hey, wait a minute here.
Retreat to your corner.
It is all ugly. No. But what I like, and it's probably an odd thing to say I like about it, but what I like about it is that it's pointing out that, hey, you can have some discrimination when it comes to the old stuff that you like.
I don't think you want to discriminate. You want to be
discerning.
Discerning, yes.
Well, I'm using the word discriminate in a way that's not, doesn't mean.
I don't think you can.
Yes, you can.
No, let's not.
All right, so we'll say discerning. You want to be discerning.
Yes.
And not just pick any random piece to reproduce or to look
to your point, just because it's old, it's not necessarily worth making again.
Yeah, not everything has to be remade.
Yeah. And I mean, well, there's other things I'd point out about how things were done back then too, that, just because a technique was used back in the day doesn't mean it's good, and that it can't be improved upon. This is a really aggressive.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, one thing, I like that article as well. One thing I like about it is that one room at Hancock Shaker Village, they did some studies about the paint, and because now it's all these somber, muted tones, this kind of brick red and yellow ochres and slate blues. But they did some research on the pigments that were used, and they repainted one room
with the original colors,
and it's like this acid bright cacophony of color, and it's like, wow, maybe these guys weren't as straight-laced and somber as I thought. They looked like they were having a good time there, so that was really cool.
They were bold.
There's a yellow that they use in that room for the trim, and I think also the floor, and it's insane how bright it is. I mean, it's crazy, and they pair it with a red that is just like, it's pretty a garish combination. But yeah, I forgot about that was in the article. But I also like that. It was around that time that I got more adventurous using milk paint in my own, the stuff that I build, because I was like, that's really cool.
Right.
And it's that in particular did change my understanding of shaker furniture, because normally the stuff you see from them is really old, and so the colors have been muted and they have patina over them, and so you're not really getting the full effect of what the piece looked like when it was built.
Right. And also when I had gotten a behind the scenes tour of the upstairs one time as well, and they have that whole room devoted to the shaker boxes, and many of those were milk painted as well. And when you see like how they reproduce that color, and then you kind of imagine what those individual boxes look like when they were made, it's pretty dazzling. I mean, the shakers, they took some risks in a big way, even though they were very practical. What they made was bold.
Also, I think
you can't wear that fancy button, but you can paint that thing bright yellow.
the other thing about shaker furniture, which I think is lost on a lot of folks, is that unlike other furniture movements like arts and crafts furniture or period furniture or Victorian or mid-century modern, other than chairs and maybe oval boxes and such, the shakers didn't build furniture
to sell
in production to sell. So it isn't like there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of the exact same chimney cupboard or sewing table. It's like, no, that's that one.
Right.
And,
Yes.
and you go to Hancock Shaker Village, and I went there really liking shaker furniture. You know, obviously, and my vision of it was like the shaker workshops, really classic pieces. And I go there, you start looking at all these rooms, like, okay, well, where's the shaker piece? Where's the, and like we were looking at the different details, and I was like photographing the different poles. And there's like a classic shaker pole. No, every single pole and every single piece was a different shape and different proportions and dimensions and different woods.
Yeah, a great example of that is the candle stand. There's like this iconic candle stand, which has the perfect wine bottle shape to the post, these beautiful feet.
Right.
And you think, oh, well, that's what shaker candle stands look like. It's like, no, that's what that one looks like.
Yeah.
And that's why people make that one.
That's right, because the rest of them are kind of barf. There's one that's in here with like Queen Anne feet, and it's just like, it's just not as good, you know? And yeah, but there's a few pieces, man, they nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Yeah.
But I do like the oddballs. You know, like you go in a room and there's this thing, it's like, whoa, what were you thinking when you made that thing? But it's kind of cool because it's so idiosyncratic and it's very non-commercial. It's like, nope, a guy said, oh, I'm going to try this. It's like, okay, you probably didn't try it again, but it's there.
He was shunned after that. But there was the one, but even though like there's a clear break in these sort of periods of shaker furniture, one thing that I think does unify all of them is that they seem to always place an emphasis first on utility.
Yeah.
And also the stripped down sort of lack of decoration.
Yeah.
That even though the earlier stuff is dramatically different, especially the Victorian influence stuff is really different.
Right.
There's still that unifying theme of utility and sparse design, which still you can still go, oh yeah, I can see that was made by a shaker.
Right. And you know, the thing about shaker furniture, it looks like it wants to be used. Like if you look at some Queen Anne pieces or federal pieces that are really ornate, you're almost afraid to touch them in a way. But when you see a shaker piece, it's like, wow, that's really, you know, looks like it's something that I'm going to put in my house and I'm going to put to use, whether it's the dining table or the chimney cupboard or whatever it is.
And if you see an arts and crafts piece, you say, wow, I want to refinish that.
I see arts and crafts pieces. I'm like, ooh, that's like a warm morning in the stove.
That leg needs a taper.
Burn that thing. Burn it.
Just name you Mark.
Just kidding. I like arts and crafts furniture. Not really.
All right, let's move. Let's swing it to Mike's direction.
Okay, so I got issue number 238, and you can tell by the cover what my favorite article is going to be. There's a Matt Kenny bow front
but it's not my
cabinet.
article.
And so with that in mind, my favorite article is an article by Michael Fortune on tips for steam bending.
That's all right, because I edited that article.
Well, there you go. So there's a connection.
And took all the photos.
That's the Kenny connection.
That's right.
So this is an article by Michael Fortune on steam bending, something I've done very, very little of way back in the day, but I'm contemplating making a rocking chair, arts and crafts style rocking chair. And the two examples I have, both the back rails, which are curved, and the little rocker parts, which are curved, are continuous grain. So it wasn't bent lamination, it wasn't sawn, it was steam bent. So I go, oh, steam bending. Let me see what I can find out about it. And that's what's really cool about working in a magazine is you happen to have them at your desk at work to look through. And so Michael's article on 7 secrets of steam bending, it's really like an entire tutorial on the basics of steam bending and the really important aspects and the tips to be successful at it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. It's like one of those things I haven't done it before. Now I need information, and you go back, and there it is. And what I really like about this is he's very, very adamant about using air-dried lumber. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I'm going, really, do I have to use air-dried lumber? Like, what if I don't? Can I get by without it? And he's saying, no, you have to use it. But I go back even further to issue 149 in an article by Lon Schleining on steam bending. He said, yeah, no, it doesn't have to be air-dried. It can just be kiln-dried lumber, and it may not bend as much. So it's like, nice.
So
I have
there's
permission
cherry
to do.
picking.
Yes, I can do whatever I want.
It is. Michael does some pretty impressive bending. I mean, he did. I saw some video or photos of him bending at the first Fine Woodworking Live. We did that. It was outside, and he had the long beam in a way, and he was bending it like it was a rubber band. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I saw a table he made out of walnut on one of my trips up there, and I think it was like a 4x4 or 4x6, something really beefy. And they turned it like almost into like a loop to loop.
Yeah.
Huge.
Like a paper clip or a corkscrew
just
kind of a shape.
crazy.
Yeah.
Michael's articles are always great because he just has this ability, no matter what it is that he does, he can sort of synthesize it down into here are the 7 things that are important to know about this. Mm-hmm. You can really distill the information down into something that's easy to understand and very clear, and that also takes all the mystery out of it. You know, because woodworking's not a mystery. Woodworking's not an art in a way. It's very much a technical craft.
Yes,
and Michael's very good at exposing those sort of the technical side of it and showing it to you in a way that's easy to understand.
Yeah, and he, his background was industrial design, I believe, and so what's really cool about, and I don't know, I've been to his shop I think a couple times, and you just watch the pieces that he built, or you see the pieces that he's built, and he just has a way of figuring it out, like Matt says, is breaking down the mechanics, and he's always talked about that he never lets the technique drive his design. He designs first and then figures it out, and he does it in a stupendous way.
Yeah, an absolute modern day master.
Modern day master.
For more than a minute.
He's sending Chuck up to Canada, eh?
Was it a moment? Master in a moment.
A moment, yes. It's like Queen for a day.
Was it? It's moment with a master, right? That's what the segment's called.
Moment with a master?
Not master in a moment.
Master for a moment.
You're thinking
moment?
Mastered in a minute.
Mastered in a minute with home building. Oh, that's right.
We're not allowed to talk about that.
Is there, talk about what?
Mastered in a minute. That's home building.
What's home building?
Fine home building. What?
What's fine home building?
Anyway, we're moving on to
Tom's article.
Mine is actually a pretty recent article. In our Tools and Shops issue, of course, Matt was the editor of it, but we did on the cover it's called the Haramu. Is that how it's pronounced? Haramu workbench.
I have no clue how
but
it's
a
pronounced,
knockdown workbench. There's no glue involved in assembling it. And one of the things I really just love about this piece is that it's a very non-traditional design for Western woodworkers, I think. And it's really a fantastic journey in joinery. I mean, the number of joints that Kelly Dunton cut for this piece, and the way this article worked out was Matt was, I was not willing to spend the money to send Matt to Taiwan to photograph the building of it. So we had one of a furniture maker, a local guy, Kelly Dunton, who used to work here, build this piece for us. And it came out great. And I love the size of the piece. And Matt did a fun video on how it goes together. It's just, I like small benches. I have a pretty small, narrow shop. And so the idea of a big monster workbench just doesn't appeal to me. And this just is a perfect size. And I think a lot of people would benefit from having this workbench in their shop. It's good looking. It's made from ash. And what was the secondary wood?
It's just all ash.
It's all ash? Okay,
there's
all
some
ash.
crazy, funky joinery going on in there.
The way it works is that all the joinery is all the joints are held together because joints interlock with one another.
Yeah.
So there's no hardware fasteners at any of the joinery, and there's no glue used at any of the joinery. It all is held together just by this. It's almost like puzzle pieces fitting together.
And it doesn't rack at all.
No, it doesn't. It's a fantastic bench. It's the guy that designed it, Eric Tan, specializes in Ming Dynasty furniture, and in the Ming Dynasty furniture, a lot of the joints are this interlocking style of joint that you can put the entire piece of furniture together without using any glue at the joints or mechanical fasteners, and that's the idea behind the bench. It's a great bench. Yeah, it really is. It's heavy, it's rigid.
And And it's a nice size. It's like a perfect size for probably most shops. I think maybe you have to modify it to get a vise on it. Maybe make it a little bit longer.
Well, depending on what type of vise you wanted, we were able to get a cast iron face vise onto it. But if you wanted like a twin screw vise, you might need to adjust it a little bit.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful piece. I like it. So check it out.
I like that all 3 articles were edited by me.
Yeah, that's a shame. We gotta talk next time.
Yeah,
before.
I didn't even think about that.
We do
I
need
will
to
next
talk
time.
because what it demonstrates is my positive influence on the magazine. I deserve to be paid more.
So let's move on to questions.
What?
This one comes from Shannon, and it's going to be another Matt article, or partially Matt. And Shannon writes, I'm going to be making as my first workbench the Shaker workbench from issue 251, and do not have a lot of tools utilized in the build, nor great work surface to do some of the hand tooling. I do have the smaller Festool domino, and I've always thought about getting the larger one. Do you think it would be smart to purchase and use the larger domino for the mortise and tenons to get this project built? I plan to purchase my hand tool collection once I have a sturdy bench. Well, we got the 2 makers right here. What do you guys think?
I think that Shannon should pay me to make the bench.
What do you think, Mike?
We could just sell the one that's in the shop.
Ooh, yeah, let's just sell the one in the shop.
Yeah,
Well, maybe Shannon
we'll
can
sign it. I mean, there's always more than one way to go about doing anything in any piece of furniture. We usually try to, pick a way that folks have the means to do, or it offers a good lesson in joinery in that specific article. But, anytime you see a mortise and tenon joint, just fill in the blank with however you want to do it. We have a hollow chisel mortiser. And what do we do? The tenons with a dado blade on the table saw, a little bit of bandsaw work.
Yeah.
Go at it. Big old Festool. Here's the thing. I would say, well, gosh, you're going to go out and buy a giant Festool just to make this workbench. On the other hand, if the workbench is an excuse to buy the giant domino, go for it.
I really like the domino, but so if Shannon doesn't have a table saw, I would say instead of buying the Festool domino, and if you can't, you have the space for it or whatever, buy a table saw. Buy a nice table saw, because they're pretty comparable in price. You could get a nice little cabinet saw, and then you would be able to do a lot of you'd be able to do almost all the joinery. Not the mortises, obviously.
If you have a router and table saw, that's there you go.
There you go. Yeah. And but if you were going to use the Festool domino, I think what I would do is I just can't. Off the top of my head, I don't remember how long the longest Whopper domino is.
It's big. It's beefy.
It's like
the giant ones.
Yeah,
like 6 inches or
At
5
least
inches or so.
4 inches. Like they're like that.
I don't have it in front of me.
That looks like 5. How many millimeters is that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna break out the calculator.
Yeah, but I mean the other thing that's a little bit of a red flag is that I'm going to be making as my first workbench a giant, massive thing. It's like, so if you do, let's say you do buy a table saw instead of a Festool, make yourself an outfeed table, which kind of also doubles as a good work table. Okay, so now you have a basic workbench,
right,
in which it's going to make it a lot easier to build a really
big workbench,
big old workbench. Thing, how do you build a bench without a bench? Well, make a bench first, but not the one you want to make. Do something that's going to take a weekend to make.
Yes,
and you'll still use it.
Yeah,
but
like the previous year, in 2015, Tools and Shops,
yes,
Kelly Dutton did a outfeed table workbench. Wasn't that Tools and Shops last year?
Yes.
No, it was not. It was,
sure?
It was issue 249, but it was not Tools and Shops. Tools and Shops last year was the Shaker workbench that we're talking about.
Right.
So, like, you could build that outfeed table workbench that Kelly did. Another article edited by me. Thank you very much. And then build the Shaker works. The Shaker workbench, that's a big undertaking.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Even though we say in the video and in the article that it's something you can build in a day. Just kidding, we don't say that. It's a big undertaking. It's a pretty serious bench.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Serious.
It's a nice bench.
It's really nice. It's
if I were to make it in my shop, I'd make it shorter because I have a small shop, but it's very nice.
Not as long.
Right.
Not shorter.
No, not as long as opposed to not as high.
Right.
Yep.
There it is.
There, we answered the question, right?
Okay.
All right. Moving on. The next question that is, comes from Rich. And Rich says, our local guild had a sharpener in for a presentation. His opinion was that thin kerf blades are throwaways because they have less carbide. His suggestion was to keep a good standard size blade sharp. What do you think?
Well, I think that's really great advertising for them. That's a fantastic business plan. Exactly. It's like, listen, all you guys, don't buy these blades that don't need to be sharpened. What do you need to do?
Get a standard kerf and let me sharpen it for you.
Yeah, by the way, I'm the local sharpener.
I think there are two different animals, a standard kerf blade and a thin kerf blade. Other than the number of times to be resharpened, there's other things to consider.
Mm-hmm. But also because there are standard kerf blades that don't have much carbide on them.
Right.
There are thin kerf blades that do have a lot of carbide. So it's not thin kerf versus thin kerf. Standard kerf versus thin kerf.
Right.
Yeah.
It's tooth size versus tooth size. And that's what you have to look at.
Right.
So it's not thin versus standard.
Yeah, I think they both have a place, depending on what you're doing.
Did I just steal your thunder, Mike?
No, that was just it just thundered like in a different part of the yard, I think.
I don't know what that means.
Well, I mean, there's
What were you
different
gonna say?
considerations. Don't
Right.
let the number of sharpenings. Let's say that did hold true. What he's saying, you can sharpen a regular kerf blade more. There might be reasons why you want a thin kerf blade, regardless of the number of sharpenings. If you have an underpowered saw, if you're doing a lot of rips in stock and you want to get as much yield as you can. I was never a proponent of thin kerf blades, and I put one in my saw, I don't know, a year ago when I was ripping up some really thin strips. And of course, I was too lazy to change it out. So I started cutting some other things. And it's like, oh, this is nice. Mainly because it was a brand new blade and it was really sharp. I'd never used it, but it's still on my saw. I like it. It's like one of my favorite blades because it just cuts a little bit easier. I have a 3-horse old Delta Unisaw. And I would never say that's underpowered to the point where it needs a thin kerf blade. I like having it in there. It makes it a little bit easier to get the work through it.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about let's say, disposable thin kerf blade is that it's not a huge investment.
They're not that expensive,
you know?
Yeah.
And a high quality standard kerf blade can run you $125, $150.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big investment, for a lot of people. So, and then really you don't need one, you need two.
Right.
Because when you
One
send
estimate.
it out to be sharpened, you need to have something else to work with, right?
Right.
So now you're looking at $240 to $300, and that's an even bigger investment.
Yep.
And actually, I have had thin kerf blades, like of the type this guy's referring to, sort of disposable thin kerfs, and I've had them sharpened. You can sharpen them at least once, maybe even twice. So
Thin kerf. There you have it.
Yeah.
Don't trust the sharpener.
Yeah. So if a guy who does something for a living and charges for it comes to you and recommends that you do something that improves his business,
Yeah, it's like the local cheesemaker comes to your house and says, "Don't buy the stuff at the store."
you should eat more cheese every day. Everyone should be eating a pound of cheese, local cheese every day.
Made by my hand.
You got to,
All right.
be a
Well,
little suspicious.
Let's get away from the cheese and move on to our next segment, all-time favorite technique of all time for this week. I'll throw it Mike's way this
All
time.
right. I have two. One is not going to bother Matt too much. One really was, but I'm going to save that for later. It'll be a doozy. I got to wait for the right moment. So this one came about because I had mentioned I'm sort of on a quest to make an arts and crafts style rocking chair. And I'm basing it on one that I've been sitting in front of my wood stove every winter for probably the last 5 or 6 years. And, chairs are really hard to get right. Rockers are really hard to get right. But I thought I'm going to start with one that I really like. And so not that I'm doing an exact reproduction, but I did take a tape measure and a ruler and a sketchbook out, and I sat down and I measured every single dimension of this antique piece of furniture. So my favorite technique of all time for the week is go measure a piece of furniture, because more than just getting, the dimensions of the piece, you really start to get insight into how the piece was made. I mean, I think a furniture maker measuring a piece of furniture, you start to think about, what was this guy thinking? Is this a one-off piece, or is this for production? And you start to look at different dimensions, different offsets, and you notice things you don't notice just at looking at a piece. You really start to kind of delve into the essence of a piece. And I think it can really inform and improve your own woodworking in that it can sort of inform those hundreds of design decisions you make in making a piece of furniture.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of woodworkers said that they learned a lot about furniture, making furniture, because a lot of folks in the craft, they started out by repairing furniture, old pieces, just to pay the bills. But in examining those old pieces, they really sort of learned a lot how things were made. Yeah, it's a really cool exercise, and it was very enlightening.
The other thing I guess you probably, I'm assuming you thought about, was seeing or figuring out the order of assembly that possibly went into the work.
Yeah, you start to look at pieces, figure out the joinery, and then you work back from there, and all of a sudden you're building this piece in your head.
Yeah. I mean, one of the cool things about doing that and looking at furniture, even store-bought stuff like at IKEA or any kind of a big furniture dealer, is the consistency of dimensions, like heights of chairs and desks and things like that. And there's not much has changed over the years. I mean, those kind of design parameters are pretty much set.
Yes.
So
it's still kind of fitting the human form.
Right.
I do have a question for Mike. I wonder if is your other technique using a spill plane to create a curly cue to light your corncob pipe while you're sitting in the rocking chair by the wood stove?
Did I tell you I got a spill plane? I did.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. I gave a talk to the folks up in Albany, NWA, the Woodworkers Guild, not the band.
Did they pour over it?
And they were kind enough. They gave me, just as a token of appreciation for giving a talk, a handmade spill plane with my name on it. And awesome. And it came in also with a little ceramic
Does it say
container.
Mike or does it say Pekovich? Or does it say Mike Pekovich?
It says both.
Or does it say Michael? I know your middle name.
Lee.
Oh, you said it, Michael Lee Pekovich?
But it didn't say that. I think it said Mike.
What I'm ignorant, but what is a spill plane?
A spill plane, a spill plane is the only plane in which the shaving is the workpiece.
Is the product. What you're trying to produce.
So it's a plane where you take a shaving off the edge of a pine board, and it makes sort of like a cone-shaped curly cue.
Or spiral.
So
really
it's
tight,
long, almost like a really skinny, long spiral seashell kind of a thing, but it's a shaving. And I guess you use it. So you'd have to figure out how to light that. But once it's lit, you light the candles in your house, or you light your wood stove with it.
Your corncob pipe.
Wow.
Your corncob pipe.
All right.
Yes.
Cool.
I had no idea you got in a spill plane.
Yeah, that's awesome. A little synchronicity there. That's very cool.
All right, Matt, do you want to hit it?
Yeah, so my favorite article of all time this week. No, we're not doing articles. What are we doing? Techniques. All right. So my technique is I've been turning recently.
Tossing, too.
No, it's just turning. That's my technique. But I want to go back to, I mentioned before, the jam chuck. And I've been turning again, and I've been doing a different type of jam chuck. One technique that I picked up from Mike Mahoney, the awesome professional turner out in California. In the past, I did a jam chuck where it was a flat face, and then I kind of coned it out. And then you could take your piece and it kind of fits anywhere in that, it'll find its spot in that cone where it sits flat.
Okay, so a little concave.
Okay. And then you bring the tailstock up against it, and then you can turn like that, right? You do that when you can't use a chuck because the chuck would damage the turning or whatever. But I've been turning, so what I picked up from Michael was, or Mike rather, is to, on your jam chuck, so it's flat across the face now. And what I do is turn down a really short tenon, basically.
Okay.
And that tenon fits inside super snug onto the turning. In this case, I'm turning these little boxes that have rabbets cut on the inside, around the inside for a lid. And so that rabbet fits over this short little tenon, and it's really snug. So then you bring the tailstock up, and you can part off the tenon that was in the four-jaw chuck and the scroll chuck.
Right.
But you can then pull the tailstock away and there's enough friction in the tip. If you do it right, the friction's there, and it's a tight enough fit that then you can really lightly finish off the bottom of your turning while it's still on this jam chuck.
Cool.
So it really is fantastic. It works great.
Like
And
how many? I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but how many times did the little box thing go flying before you? Because you said you have to be really careful, which insinuated that at some point you weren't that careful.
So I had twice, I think, yesterday. I did like in the last 2 days, I did like 6 or 7 boxes, these little boxes, and so when it was a little loose, what I found I could do is just kind of hold it enough that it stays on there, and then take I was using a scraper. And light cuts with a sharp scraper, I was still able to sort of shape the bottom and clean it up and sand it. But yeah, ideally you get it really tight. The other thing you don't want to do is get it too tight and hit it with a hammer or a mallet, because then it'll split the turning.
Okay.
Good advice.
So these are all things you live and learn.
That's right. Yes.
But that's a really nice technique, that style of jam chuck.
Cool.
And I had a great tool associated with that as well, but not doing tool today.
Not today.
Let's save it for another time.
Yep. You tend to like to milk those things anyway.
Yeah.
Stretch it
I'll
out.
talk about making these 7 boxes for the next 6 months.
Okay.
Ben looks super excited over in the corner.
He's in a corn dog coma.
I don't even know what that means.
He ate like 6 corn dogs this morning for breakfast, and now he's, passed out.
I wasn't that hungry.
That's the low-cal version.
That was a light breakfast, just 6 corn dogs.
Well, my technique is actually taken straight from the pages of Fine Woodworking. This weekend I was switching out my bandsaw blade to put on a resaw blade, because I'm going to be cutting up some spalted maple chunks to make a door panel and a drawer front for a project I'm making. And going through this article, this one issue, it was 257, which is one of our more recent ones. There's a tip in the workshop tips where the guy who submitted it, Don Mesmer, basically used a spring clamp to hold the blade on the wheel while you try to thread it around the other wheel. And I used it, and it worked great. One of the things that, sometimes when you're trying to thread the wheel on, sometimes it'll fall off and just kind of annoy me. But, using the spring clamp, getting it on one wheel gave me a little bit more freedom to have 2 hands getting the wheel on the blade on the bottom wheel, and then tensioning it up and getting to work.
So that was in the magazine?
Yeah, simple and smooth.
What part of the magazine was it in?
Workshop tips, my friend.
What's workshop tips?
It's the new and improved methods of work.
Just messing.
Anyway, just it's funny. It's great to be able to use stuff from the magazine, especially the tips.
What's always been impressive about our readers is that the volume of like absolutely awesome, like really useful woodworking tips that get sent in.
Yeah.
And the occasional hang a shoe on the wall, put a file in it.
Well, the funny thing about that was,
But there's really good stuff.
It's sort of like duh, but he thought about sending it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people probably do it and think, oh, it's probably not fine woodworking or whatever. It's not good enough. But when we saw it, it's like, wow, that's pretty cool, because who hasn't struggled with that?
That could be a new segment for us, is to pick our all-time favorite workshop tip of the week.
Mine's always going to be nailing the shoe to the
Shoe
wall.
to the wall, man.
Put your files in there.
Mine's never going to be blue tape.
You just have to use the right brand.
Yeah, and there really are. I mean, that is true. Very impressive about, because every magazine has the reader tip section.
Right.
Ours rocks.
Ours rocks because we've got a great illustrator.
A great illustrator. Always have had good illustrators.
We got
And
really good readers.
good readers. That's the
Yeah.
point I'm making.
Yeah.
Our readers are awesome.
They're smart.
Yeah.
Because I often describe woodworking as an exercise in creative problem solving.
Right.
Or amateur engineering. And that mindset where you're in the shop and you come up with something number one, that's really cool. So you send it in and it's printed. And then if you're a woodworker, you look at it and you can have a lot of appreciation for something very simple that, oh, dang, I have that problem, like you were saying. And I never would have thought to do that. But now that I see that, how could I not do that from now on?
Yeah, and the other thing about, sorry, Matt, the other thing about the tips is if you think about the volume of issues that we have, 40 years worth of content and 40, it hasn't been around for 40 years, but it's probably like 37, 38 years of tips. There aren't that many repeats. To me, that's the most amazing thing. I don't think, we go back and when we vet the tips that come in, we're most of the time, I think, checking at least recent 10 years, kind of like, hey, did someone ever do this before? And they're always fresh. It's really funny.
Well, fortunately, in 40 years, we're only on to our second illustrator.
That's true.
So it helps when you have that same guy doing it for 39 years.
Yeah.
It isn't, the lack of repetition is impressive because if you look at the rest of the magazine, it's just endless repetition. It's just dovetail article after dovetail article. Just kidding. That's just, anyways, if you go online, people know what I'm joking about.
He's just joking. Yeah.
I'm joking.
We do a lot of dovetail articles, but
it's always something different. That's what, when I meet readers, one of the complaints when I used to subscribe to Fine Woodworking, but it's just the same articles over and over again. And I say, well,
Pick up a different issue.
Pick up a different issue. I know. It's like stop reading the same issue. But we do a lot of dovetail articles, but each time it's a new take on dovetails.
Yeah.
It's always something to learn.
Yeah.
right. So, all right, let's get back to some more questions. This one is from, and I apologize for not pronouncing it correctly if I mess it up, but Geir, Geir. He's from Norway, or she's from Norway. And it's right, I'm building an oak dining table, almost 40 inches wide by 11 feet long. This will be an apron table with the top secured with buttons to keep
How many
this.
aprons does he have?
I don't know, as many as he needs to tie him down. To keep this monster flat, would be wise to use some kind of battens on the underside and or breadboard ends. And regarding the breadboard ends, are there any rules or recommendations for the size of the board, i.e. size relative to total length and length of tenon in relation to the board? Whew. I'm especially concerned about diners leaning on the end of the table and breaking off the breadboard.
First of all, let's
There
just
we
say
go.
40 inches wide by 11 feet long.
That's a big table.
That is colossal. This is like for the dining hall of like a Viking village.
This is Norway.
Well, it's Norway.
I know.
Could be. I didn't know how thick this was.
Yeah, that's one he did mention.
But in terms of sort of keeping, I think, legs and aprons, that's fine. Securing the top to the aprons with buttons so it can move across its grain is a great idea. Breadboards, throw them on if you like them and you like the look, because breadboards don't keep anything flat per se. They just kind of look kind of cool and hide the end grain if you don't like that. In terms of battens going across, I would probably, 11 feet, I'm not sure the distance between the legs, if there's 4 legs or 6 legs, but I would definitely have, let's say there's only 4 legs. So you have aprons on the end, really long aprons on the side. I would probably put at least 2 more cross aprons
Or stretchers.
or stretchers attached to the long side aprons, along the way. So now you have basically 4 cross aprons, 2 on the end, 2 in the middle, button everything down. So you're not just attaching towards the end and the outside, you also have some attachment points there. And I think, number one, if it's really thick, you're probably still not going to keep it flat because that wood is going to kind of want to do what it wants to do, but it will create a really rigid structure and keep the table, really, really solid.
What if it would be great if it was a pedestal table? Like just a single pedestal. What do you think about using battens that are sliding dovetails?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you want to, I would go the batten route if it were like a trestle style table that didn't have aprons.
Yeah.
Then you probably want something there, and the little dovetail battens are a really clean way to go about doing that.
Right.
Prevent some twists.
You wouldn't even have to glue those in. If they fit well, you could just
Either peg them in the center.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Who did that? Was it article? Was that Chafin?
Andrew Hunter.
Oh, it was Andrew Hunter.
did that,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. That was a great article.
Yeah. And Andrew will be at Fine Woodworking Live, by the way.
He will be.
It's going to be awesome.
Yes.
I can't wait. Anyway.
11 feet long. That's huge.
Big table. That's a big family.
It's a big room.
That's a big
Yeah.
Maybe it's partly in the dining room, partly on the porch. You know?
Do they have porches
through
in Norway?
I don't know. I'm sure they do.
I don't know. Anyway, well, that's it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks for our next episode. Remember to send your questions and comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. And please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on the web at shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop. We're out. We're done. That was lively and engaging. It touched on so many points.
What's the matter, Ben?
I'm waiting for you guys to say something funny. That's not going to happen today.
Pull my finger.
You know, it's like in terms of toxic, there are really sort of two different considerations. One is, you know, the final finish when it's dry. And as is often noted, any finish that's fully cured is in essence non-toxic, except for lead paint. So yeah, so there you go. But the other consideration is, what are the hazards like before it's dry in terms of applying it? Like milk paint, when you're stirring it up and stuff, that powder is so fine, you probably shouldn't be breathing that. Because a lot of the really fine silicates, I know, are really bad for your lungs. So I would imagine there, and isn't there lye in milk paint? Something caustic. Something caustic. Something caustic.
Pull my finger.